Joining me today on Songwriting for Songwriters is Phil Meadley, who was the special guest of last week's episode. But this is part two, because Phil and I, as we spoke about briefly in last week's episode, have a new tune called Hallelujah, Let Yourself Be Mine. And as you may have heard at the start of the podcast episode last week, I mentioned that there was some kind of thinking that we might release this tune under a different name. So my first question, well, hello Phil, you're there. Welcome back.
Hiya.
Welcome back.
Hiya.
Part two. So I think really it's like a good question of like, what was the consideration of not putting the tune Hallelujah, Let Yourself Be Mine under the Gaslight's name, and why did you decide to sort of go ahead and do that?
Well, I think when we got together, it was basically very much a thing of you were finishing your project that you've been doing. I was in hiatus from the Gaslights. I tried another project that hadn't worked out. So I was basically like, let's start from scratch. I've got this concept. What do you think about it? You liked it. And then we just vibed off each other. So it was very much we just got on with it, thinking we were going to do a separate project. It's very spontaneous. So it felt right at the time. It was interesting listening back. It felt right at the time to start it as a new project. As I think you remember, don't you? So
I mean, do you think it gave like you a little bit of freedom for a second, just to kind of maybe come off the kind
yeah,
of, because I just
absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, if you listen back, if you listen back to the podcast, I am talking a lot about that, having the freedom of expression, and I felt a little bit like I said in my head, I had this thing of I was going to do 3 albums. It was just such a solid feeling that this is what I was going to do. I was determined to do 3. It'd been hard to do 1. I pushed it, and I thought, so psychologically, I was thinking that's really the end of it for a long time, not indefinitely, well, not forever, but so I think that sort of so I was thinking creatively it would be good to go in a completely new direction, and so that's how this whole concept started. So I was thinking, it was really worth doing, but and that's how we basically made the album thinking this would be a new project. And what changed really was well, it was thinking about how we'd market it, how we'd push it, and it was really a conversation with Tom Robinson that made me rethink it. I mean, I think at one point you were going, should we release this as a Gaslight? So I remember it quite distinctly, and I was saying, oh no, I don't want to do that. And Tom sort of said, why aren't you releasing it as the Gaslights? Because it really builds up your catalogue for starters, because we've got quite a strong catalogue anyway. So it builds up your catalogue. It doesn't really matter if it's stylistically slightly different. And also there's a fan base there. But in my head, I was always like, had this idea of what the Gaslights was. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So even though it was quite a loose concept, I was thinking that I was a bit inhibited by that. So I kind of wanted to like push myself a bit to try different things. But as he said to me, it's still the same producer. So it just shows, in some ways, it shows your versatility.
Mm.
So I thought, well, if I can do that and I can carry on being creative and just going with my gut feeling, then the idea of going as the Gaslights would be worth it. But it was very much a conversation with you to see how you felt about it, I think.
Yeah.
So I absolutely didn't want to do it without your feelings about it. And I think we discussed a long time about if it was the right thing to do or not, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I mean, I think it is the right thing to do, because I think I agree with Tom really, which is like, I think what's really interesting for me when I look at artists is like how they've progressed and what moves they make. And this is a different move. And, I think, but it is you, like Tom pointed out. And also from my point of view, as I mentioned a little bit on the podcast last week, if I'm sent a track which I've musically made, although I've added a few things musically,
Mm.
but it's your music, it's your music. So like I am collaborating and writing as a vocalist and a melody writer and a lyric writer, and to do with the branding, and that's been really great. That we're working.
Yeah.
So, but it's like it's your thing. So for me, it's like a privilege to be involved with it, and also to be on a few tracks, on an album's worth. That's great. So for me, it made sense really, and also from my point of view, because it's obviously the band, the Gravity Drive is, that's two voices. That is just my voice. So also
Yeah.
there's the idea of me coming up with, I haven't joined the Gaslight Troubadours, but this is like the Gaslight Troubadours, and I'm the vocalist on this one. So it also gave me room to think about, well, what name am I going under? Because, you know,
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to sort of have a slightly different artistic name or vision for this project and for like collaborative projects. So, that's where the Mirorim came from, which has gave me that opportunity to kind of
Mm.
have a different sort of aspect. So, I mean, I think it's great you've done it in the Gaslight Troubadours name actually. And some of the feedback that I think I've seen online of your fans hearing you've got a new single has been great, and they're interested and they're up for it, and the podcast you've explained the slightly new direction. So I think it's really good. I think it's great.
There's, there's, yeah, no, absolutely. No, I agree. Um, yeah, no, totally. What was I going to say? My train of thought disappeared down the drain. Um, so there's one thing is, once I got round, my head got round to the idea of, okay, let's release it as a Gaslights. Um, one thing, yeah, I just remembered what I was going to say. I listened back to some of the stuff, and actually, it's not that far removed in
Mm,
some respects to some things I've done before. Certainly in Curse of the Gaslights, um, I was going more towards sort of more psychedelic indie. Even Stranger Swings, like the track I did with you, is quite dark and dystopian.
yeah,
Same with the Tom Robinson stuff. So actually, it wasn't as far removed as I thought.
yeah,
And the other thing was, I was thinking, once I got my head around, I was thinking, well, if I can, what else can I bring to the table with the Gaslights? Because I just didn't want to repeat myself. If you listen to all the different albums, I'm never repeating myself because I get quite bored of doing that. So I thought it was really nice as well to showcase the fact of just working with one singer.
mm,
And so there's two visions. It's like your lyrics, your voice, very much a 50-50 thing. And I think that's really interesting.
yeah.
That shows another completely different side of the Gaslights. And if I'm allowed to to release music under the Gaslights with the proviso that I can take it in different directions, then that's creatively satisfying for
Well, of
me.
course you can do that. That's because it's your music, which is
I know, but it's a weird thing, even though exactly it's an inner monologue really.
mm,
It's like what I can consider was the Gaslights, how I consider it should go. It's very much that you set up little barriers in your head,
mm,
I think.
mm.
Um, I certainly do, even though no one said it,
No,
and no one expects it. It's in your head. It's like, well, that's what that is,
yeah, there's
and this has
also
got to be that
there's
sort of thing. Do you see what I mean?
considerations for like other band members and people that have been involved and all the rest of it. But it's I think you've done the right thing. And so listeners, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, listen to that. And Phil has just explained why he is putting it under the Gaslight Troubadours name and why he was considering not doing. And we thought we are going to do something slightly different this week because the track is called Hallelujah, Let Yourself Be Mine. It is available now on everywhere you can get it. So please check it out, download, stream, Bandcamp, all the rest. Just
And I would say one thing before you go. I'm very, very proud of this music that we've done. I think it's really good. I
yeah,
think it's really strong. So I'm very proud to put it out anyway. But as the Gaslights, I'm very proud to do it with you.
oh,
It's I think it's one of the strongest things I've ever done. So
beautiful.
I'm just putting it out there.
Likewise, I feel the same. So this is part two of the of a kind of podcast duos thing in which Phil and I we're going to discuss the track and we're going to discuss the collaborative process between the two of us and just get a little deep dive into that. So we've got three questions that we've um, decided to ask each other. So we're going to do that right now. We've set a little conversation sort of time of 10 or 15 minutes, and we've got three questions for each other as well to kind of open up a little bit about the collaborative process we've both been through on this track and on the album. So, hi, Phil. Thanks for being with us.
Oh yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
So, as the listeners may have heard last week, we have a new record, Hallelujah, Let Yourself Be Mine by the Gaslight Troubadours, featuring myself under the name The Mirorim. So, how was that for you, Phil, that creative experience on that track?
It was excellent. It's the oldest tune we've worked on. So we're talking maybe a year ago that we started talking about it.
Yeah,
Do you
about that.
think?
I think it's under a year, actually.
Yeah, it could be under a year. The process has felt quite quick,
Yeah,
but that's definitely the oldest tune. I mean, that's the first tune I sent to you.
yeah,
Um, I remember it just being really good. I mean, I remember it's been quite spontaneous.
yeah.
Um, I just had this. I don't remember. I don't think I sent you the whole thing, did I? I think I might have sent you the idea, sort of maybe an 8 bar, something like that. Was that how it went? Do
You know, I have no memory of that. All I remember is literally being sent the track and being blown away by it.
you know what? It may be that I sent the whole thing.
I think you did. I think you did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes after that, I think we did a few sort of 8 bar ideas. I like to sort of send something quite whole, but then again, you've got to be quite open, because also some half it's really strange, but sometimes the verse and choruses don't we don't see it the same way. So the
Mm,
singer will see the verse and chorus is quite different. It has been known that I've changed them right round to
okay.
accommodate the singer, which is quite an interesting thing.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I remember it being very spontaneous. I remember you instantly saying this is great. So it wasn't even like there was no persuasion involved, was there? It was
No, no.
basically I've got this tune, that's amazing, let's get on with it.
It was
So I
very,
think so I think you've really vibed off it
I did.
amazing quickly, actually. That's what I remember.
I did. I had that as a sort of, with these things, when I've been sent stuff from producers before, I kind of instantly know if I love it, and straight away I loved it. And then sometimes it's like, oh, this is going to be quite tricky, or
Yeah.
I have to kind of give this a little bit of time. But that was just like, right, I'm in. I know what I'm doing, which is great. Which is great. So
Yeah.
let's I kind of, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is because lots of people, when you're promoting your own music, often on social media, there's a lot of repetition of the same thing or the same image. So we just thought we'd have
Yeah.
a chat to kind of let whatever fans or listeners we have into a little bit more of a kind of slightly deeper dive about the track. So
Into the process of it in a way. Yeah.
yeah, a
It's
little bit.
sort of behind the scenes and to a certain degree,
Yeah, I
I
think
would
so.
say.
Just open up a little bit more about it. So I asked
Yeah.
you to kind of think of three questions and me to think of three questions. So
Yeah.
I'm going to invite you to shoot first from the hip to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's kind of an obvious one,
Mm.
but and we've slightly discussed it, I suppose. But so the first thing I thought was firstly when you heard the music I sent you, what are your initial thoughts about how you could approach it, both vocally and lyrically?
So initially, like the string loop, which is obviously like sort of Eastern kind of sound, led me to that idea of like mysticism and kind
Yeah,
of
it's like a Bollywood sort of string, actually. Yeah.
yeah, it led me to kind of this mysticism sort of feel. And then with the beats, it was just like this slightly gnarly kind of mysticism. And so I think
Yeah.
really I wanted to sing, I had a bit of John Lydon in mind from that track he did with Left Field. And I wanted to kind of like
Yeah.
let my voice kind of ring out and be quite of a higher register than I've done with stuff before, a bit more
Mm.
in power.
Yeah.
So I very much saw myself as like this kind of Lydon-esque type of preacher, kind of letting it all out basically, and started to
Yeah.
cultivate this idea of being kind of like some sort of cult leader who was sort of coming up with these lines that were like on the one hand kind of inviting and open questions, and then on the other hand sort of being quite, the same line could be seen as being like quite positive but also quite coercive. And so this line between the two things of something sounding quite intriguing or inviting, but also actually, actually being the kind of thing that would make people sort of give too much of themselves away and kind of be persuaded by this kind of cult leader mentalist who
Yeah,
I imagined myself being. So it was this. It all came quite quickly as a kind of that was the sort of route really that I'm going to imagine I'm this person who's kind of
yeah,
preaching a sermon, and the sermon is on the one hand sort of open and inviting, but on the other hand, in a different light, could be seen as actually quite kind of manipulative and coercive. So I was just
yeah.
playing with those ideas really, which is like on the second
Yeah.
verse, all this idea of like nothing's real, change the way you think and how you feel, which is just like quite sort of in a way inviting and in a way kind of meaningless. But it's often those kind of people will say, "Oh, all you have to do is change the way you think and feel." You know that, and
They're
then
quite menacing as well, I'd say.
yeah,
It's
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 that
it's a menacing kind of track, isn't it? In a
it
really
is
weird kind of way.
yeah, it's quite menacing. But that kind of sort of self-help line, which is like, "Oh right, yeah, I can have what I want if I just change the way I think and feel," which on
Yeah,
some level is true, but on the other level is like also that's the kind of language which these kind of people use to win people over and get them to think that they somehow have the answer. So that was kind of my approach to it.
excellent, excellent. Love it. You
So
want to ask me something?
I do. My question to you is, the Gaslight Troubadours are now have done made 3 albums, and you have a lot of fans that have been into what you've been doing and everything. So I would like to ask you, what's different about this track, and if you like the album, and what's similar to the work you've done before. What can the Gaslight Troubadour fans expect from this upcoming single and release?
Well, I the similarity is that I produced it.
There we go.
That's the simple answer.
Yeah.
Um, what's different about it is it's a I think it's a very cohesive idea. So I'm basically I've always worked with different vocalists. I'd never intended to, but that's just the way it went. So I'd flit quite a lot musically as well. So working with one vocalist, your good self, I think it hones the idea a lot more. So I think there's a more cohesive idea running through the whole of the album. That's what I would say, just by
Mm,
the two of us collaborating.
mm. Yeah, and I think
Um,
possibly within that, there's a bit more. I think you can explore that collaboration in different depth, can't you? Because there's different shades and aspects for each track on this album. It's not the same thing.
yeah,
There's different places we go to.
but I mean, even when you just work with another person, if you're both versatile, you can still to go quite a lot of different places to make
Yeah.
it interesting. But I still think there's a cohesiveness of working. Well, firstly, even though we've done a lot with your voice, it's the same singer.
Mm,
And so that's kind of a nice thing. I think I say that in a very positive way. You're very versatile, so it's not like a one-dimensional thing.
mm,
So I'd say that's a real positive. Um, it's absolutely not swing. It's not the kind of like an electro swing. This is very much a kind of psych 90s sort of big beat kind of sound. I mean, you mentioned Uncle a lot. I think that's right. Sort of Andrew Weatherall, that kind of vibe. So it's the stuff that we both like. So the influences I'd say are things that we were both really into. So it was for me it was a case of what's going to work best for both of us.
mm.
So my approach to this was very much thinking before I started that what would really suit Elijah,
Okay. Yeah.
and also something that I really like because I can't just make music to order, if you know what I mean. I have to be really into it as well. So I'd say that I think it's quite psychedelic. We both like the Beatles, for example. Later Beatles for me. I'm guessing the same for you.
Mm. Yes.
Um, the Verve has got like you're really into the Verve. There's some really great psychedelic stuff from the early Verve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah. So I think that's what. So it's a kind of quite a deep album in a way. I think maybe. Do you think that or an interesting
Yeah, I
album?
think I think so. I think it's I mean one of the things I would say to the Gaslight Troubadour fans is there's definitely still like this kind of like macabre, darker overtone
Yeah,
throughout as
yeah,
well,
yeah.
I think. And a kind of like menace and a kind of psychedelic playfulness, I think, is there
And
as
if
well.
anything, the interesting thing about that, if anything, I would say you're the one that encouraged me to go a bit darker. So even for like Hallelujah, I remember I mean for the verse bit, you were going, oh, it needs to be gnarlier. Can we
Mm.
get some some harder sort of like gnarly electric guitar in? In the end, I sort of did an amalgam of synth and guitar to give it a really gnarly sort of prodigy kind of edge.
Mm.
So I think you actually encourage that more than me. I was almost like, oh, this is a great hook.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can sing to this, and you go, but can we do something like Chemical Brothers or
yeah.
you know, but and Prodigy. So it's. I thought that was interesting in a way that you'd almost push me that way, which I
That's
like. It didn't take much pushing, I have to say, but
yeah. No, I
you
like
know,
it. I like a bit of menace in tracks. So it's kind of that was a kind of something I like. But yeah, that's great to hear the kind of push and pull of these things. Definitely.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So
you're
my second question, yeah.
yeah, go for
Um, so did you find it easy to inhabit the character of the cult leader?
it.
And do you have any personal experience of this, of dealing with cult leaders yourself, which might have led you towards this?
Um, so like I've always been interested in the esoteric and the kind of looking for the answer and being curious. And I remember once being about 17 years old, and some guy coming up to me on the street handed me one of those Scientology like questionnaires,
Oh, right.
and he was like, "I'll come this way, come with me, and come now to the center or something." And I was like, and I was naive enough to be like, "Oh yeah, that'd be cool," and but I didn't go. Something inside me went no. But I read these questions and were like, "This is really intriguing and interesting. I am genuinely interested in this," but I didn't follow through with like filling it in and
Mm,
sending it off or anything like that. But I've just always been interested in sort of finding out what the answer is. And so I've done a lot of research into kind of lots of different philosophies and philosophers and everything like that. And as a songwriter, I've always been interested in sort of what is this force that we joins us all together and all this kind of thing.
yeah,
But in recent times, my search, I think sometimes when you go down a rabbit hole, you can kind of be looking for like positive stuff, and then you kind of see, oh, there's another flip side to this actually.
yeah.
And I was very much into a podcast called A Little Bit Culty, and these
Oh,
are
right.
two guys that, well, husband and wife actually, who were in a cult called Nexium, and they freed themselves from it, and their job now is to
Mm,
kind of try and help wake people up to kind of cult leaders and various cults and things.
yeah,
So I think I've always been interested in that sort of like psychedelic late 60s, 70s period.
yeah. Like the
With
Manson sort of thing.
yeah, kind of that, and the Kool-Aid acid test by Tom Wolfe and all this
Yeah,
kind of stuff. And so
yeah.
this podcast opened me up to kind of the language used by certain kind of
Mm,
cult leaders or people that are coercive. And it was just a bit of a rabbit hole I went down. And
mm,
so that's kind of, I found it quite easy to inhabit that character because in reality, and this is something Jim Morrison was playing with the Doors at a certain point, he
mm.
was aware of like, if you're a rock star on stage, not saying I'm one, but he was one. There's this like control that a rock star used to have, maybe not so much anymore, over like
Yeah.
over a crowd, and that is the same sort of area in which like a evangelical preacher or a cult leader or a
Yeah.
pharmaceutical company or world leader or whoever have, and they have
Mm,
slogans and they repeat the same things and they ask questions. So it was kind of, in a way, quite easy for me to inhabit it because I've done so much research about like this kind of language they use, and also, if you're an entertainer and you're a front man, there is like this element of like kind of making art for yourself, but you put it out there, and if you're lucky enough, some people love it, and you get
mm.
fans and stuff. But there's a bit of an area where like you are presenting something which isn't totally you, and people can kind of fall for that, and you are presenting that to some degree. So it
Yeah.
was quite easy for me to just put the things together and think this is kind of an area to explore. And
Yeah.
so, in a sense, the whole album is kind of about this kind of like cult leader character. It's not a concept album, but it's kind of like this
No.
idea of exploring the kind of dialogue of that kind of preacher. And then, this stuff I've sort of, other songs aren't that at all. They're kind of something completely different, but it's kind of
Yeah.
got an overarching theme of this kind of area. So it was quite easy for me to inhabit it because I'd done so much research and had read so much about it. And also, if you're an entertainer or performer on some level, you are looking for something from an audience. So you are, without realizing it, kind of putting some kind of spell on or presentation on to get applause, I guess. So there's
100%.
so there's a kind of hypnotism involved, and that is the area in which I was kind of coming from. Really, sort of just. I almost thought there should be like a warning sign in the album or in the next video saying something like all leaders, religious, political, or self-confessed teachers or gurus should be ignored or, followed at your own peril. It's that kind of vibe.
Yeah, excellent. Coming back to Morrison, because you mentioned Morrison, I was watching a sort of Doors gig. I can't remember what it was in San Francisco or something, and he had amazing stage presence, didn't he? You're captivated by him.
Yeah.
And you're talking about this kind of almost like a cult leader thing. Do you think he knew that he had that, or is it just something that was a part of him?
I
I'm
think
not sure.
well, I went through a kind of big doors period researching, reading a lot, and I think he was, I mean, a very beautiful man, number one. So
Mm.
he was obviously attractive to lots of people. But I
Yeah,
think he became aware of like his own act, his own sort of, I think he saw
yeah,
through the kind of act and was quite an
mm.
intelligent man. And so he, I think, was playing with the kind of idea of what is this thing that, because he was asked like, to say something on TV, wasn't he, when they played Light My Fire? Like,
Yeah,
and that he would always do the thing that was true to his artistic integrity, but there's also
yeah,
he kind of like exposed himself on stage or kind of acted like he was going to, and then got
yeah. He did. Yeah, yeah.
arrested. And I think he was just playing with the kind of hypnotism of crowds, really. So
I mean, obviously the drugs and alcohol took over from him, but at the he had it from the beginning, didn't he? This is the interesting thing about him. Maybe he's a little bit shyer, but he still had that presence,
yeah, I
didn't
mean,
he?
hidden away probably or brought to the surface by lots of alcohol and drugs. But there's also like quite an
Mm.
interesting, if anybody likes a rabbit hole, you should
Yeah,
jump into this
go
sort
for it.
of the kind of, I mean, Jim Morrison's father was an army general, and it's quite interesting how
Yeah,
many kids that became successful artists in the 60s and 70s, fathers were in kind of positions of interesting
yeah.
roles within the kind of CIA and the army. Not that I believe all this stuff, but it's interesting.
But
So
also the clergy as well,
mm,
because Lemmy Kilminster,
mm,
obviously Lemmy,
mm,
his dad was a vicar, something
yeah.
like that.
Well, it's really interesting because, like, also there's a great documentary about the Kings of Leon actually,
Oh yes, yeah,
and their father was a preacher, so they were training to be. Two of them were training to
yeah. I've
become.
seen that. I've
It's a
seen
great
that.
documentary, and obviously Caleb's got a great voice, man, and like he's
Mm.
he's a great lyricist as well. And so there's that thing I think where there is like a sort of evangelical madness to like rock and
Yeah,
roll,
yeah,
and
yeah. I
dance
agree.
music and dance music. I mean, if go to a club or go
That's like
to
a church. Yeah,
yeah, it is, and
yeah,
it's actually real. It's kind of a real connection, communion, but there's also like a kind of there's a menace there too.
yeah. Absolutely, it can be. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Really exploited, I'd say.
Okay, let me ask you my second question then.
Okay.
So my second question was, when you were creating this track, did you have any kind of images or influences or kind of feelings within yourself when you were creating it that kind of came out or inspired it?
No.
Okay.
No, well, not really. It's like making music is so instinctual to me. It's all
Mm,
gut. It's all gut. Like when I was a journalist, it's all about the intellect
yeah.
in a way, or whatever you want to call it. With music, it's for me, it's like the string that so that string sample was the start of it.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, that lended itself to the way the track went, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, once I had the beat, I mean, I spent a long time going through beats, making them, looping, whatever, to get the right feel. So once I got that, no, it didn't. I didn't have a way. I didn't have a way of where to take it until I gave it to you, and so I
Okay.
was kind of looking for you to add the narrative onto it.
Okay.
And then once you added a narrative onto it, then I carried on creating more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you see what I mean? So I didn't really have. I don't like to have too many preconceptions when I'm working with
Mm.
a vocalist of how it should go. I don't unless there's something really strong in my head. Mostly, I want to hear what they're adding to it
Yeah,
because
sure.
that's interesting to me,
I mean,
and
this
then
is
that helps me create the narrative in the music. See what I mean?
I do. I mean, this is quite interesting because at one point we were going to call this project "Children of the Sun," and
Yeah,
what we've done instead is it's going to be out under the Gaslight Troubadours name, featuring myself under the name The Mirorim.
yeah,
But we called it Children of the Sun because we were talking about these kind of cult references, and Children of the Sun
mm,
is such a good either band
yeah,
name or album name because it was almost like this kind of late sort of early 70s sort of cult name like Children of the Sun, you know, just kind
yeah.
of so
The music
again,
felt like that, didn't it? The music
yeah,
actually felt like that's kind of how the name sort of created itself, I suppose, wasn't it? Because
absolutely.
of the way it was going. So carry on, sorry.
You know, not at all. Just that it's interesting to see how, like, what you're saying there. Like, I suppose the narrative came about from my sort of mad little idea, and then we kind of built that up from sort of coming up with the title "Children of the Sun" and this whole kind of story or narrative that was going on around it,
Yeah,
which
I'm
is
just kind of quite open-minded, and I'm also very intrigued by what someone's going to bring to the table because I think the tune became the tune once you got involved. I just created an idea for you to work with, a template,
mm,
and then do you see what I mean? I'm quite loose in that way. And
I,
then once I'm really into the idea, then I fully get into it, and then that's
there's
how
some,
it becomes darker.
yeah. I mean, it's good to be. You're very open, I think, as a producer, and very kind of you know, you create such strong identities in your music, so it was very easy for me to write. In fact, actually, one of the things that I set myself a rule for this,
Hmm.
which came about through this first track, but throughout the album, which was okay, listen to it, and then my first instinctive response will be that'll be it, and then
Yeah.
basically I would literally write every single tune within no more than half an hour and record it whilst I was writing the lyrics. So it was all literally kind of, I wanted to get this feeling of
Yeah.
almost being kind of evangelical in the moment, like literally writing it and recording it and sort of writing the melodies at the same time, just to kind of,
I,
as
I
a,
yeah. I mean, also it's interesting you saying that is also I think some experiences we had before. I
mm,
think you said it to me, and I've definitely said it to you. I hate it when it takes too long
yeah,
to make a track and
yeah,
an album
yeah,
because I think my creativity goes. I'm like you, and I'm quite sparky.
yeah,
If I'm feeling it, I want to go for it. I do not want to. I can come back to it, but I don't feel it as much. So
no,
I think we both talked about how spontaneous it should be
yeah, I think so.
when we started. But also, I was going to say you that to do this, you've got to have a level of trust with the person.
Yeah,
So I really trust, I think after this track and maybe this one and another one, I was like, yeah, great. I don't have to think and worry about that. Elijah's in control of that side of things. I can control my side of things. And so I think that became stronger. So I was never worried about what you do,
mm, nice,
which
thank you.
made it more fun. It made it more fun for me.
No, well, that's nice to have your trust as well. I appreciate that. That's great.
Mm.
So, question three.
Right. Oh, yeah, to you.
Yeah.
So I was just delving a little bit deeper into your songwriting process.
Mm.
Are you constantly switched on to this, or do you have to be in the right mindset to start thinking about lyrics or songs? You kind of answered it, but
No, I'm on all the time. It's
yeah,
so like whether it's I have a tune either I'm writing, which will be on repeat on my head the whole time, and I'll be looking for just let that happen, or I will be listening out for clips of conversation or looking at for titles,
yeah.
or my head will just start creating its own music, and so there's this music playing all the time in my head. So I'm on all the time, like a sort of antenna is up all the time.
So how for how long have you been like this?
Okay, this is going to get weird now.
Great.
Okay, so when I was about 6 years old, I was in my parents' bed trying to avoid going to school reading a book,
Yeah,
and my mum was calling down like, "Time to get up now." And I was just like, "I don't want to go to bed," and I just started to hear my own name in my own head at a certain octave repeating, and then it did it an octave higher, an octave lower, and just loads of
Wow.
different voices saying my name at different speeds, and I actually thought I was going mad, and I was like, oh
Yeah.
shit, this is like some kind of scary thing, and I couldn't stop it, and then eventually it did stop, and then I went to school and thought nothing of it. Apart from that, was a bit intense.
Yeah.
Um, since that point, basically, there's just been music all the time. So,
So
you know,
have you got any theories now about what was going on? Because obviously you were thinking, okay, this is a bit freaky. You were quite young, but have you got any theories about what was going on in your head
uh,
when that fired off?
I've had different theories, but one of which I think is probably just like creativity and imagination
Yeah.
that was just like open. And
Yeah.
then I also, to some extent, have some kind of experience of some type of clairaudience at times. So there's maybe a
Mhm.
bit of that going on as well. But I think this kind of just hearing music all the time happened at that point, really. So
Yeah.
it started at that point.
Excellent. It's really interesting. I didn't know that.
No, and I'm not sure I should have said it, but I have now.
No, I don't think
Um,
so. I think that's interesting because I mean, everyone reaches. I mean, so I can give you a just to sort of get involved in the weirdness. Not that
mm,
it's that weird, but I hadn't really an idea that I was going to make music for quite a long time. I knew I was really into music.
yeah,
Um, I mean, like for example, I was more into music than my friends.
yeah,
So any latest bands would probably be me that found it
okay,
out of all my friends. It's just so I remember I went to a college one day and I was doing this course and I wasn't really enjoying it. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I remember sitting in the car thinking, what am I doing? And suddenly, as clear as day, I said, I'm going to do something music.
yeah,
That's it.
brilliant. Just
That was
you,
it.
you,
It
you
was just like literally like that's what I'm going to do. And
love
from
that.
then on, things took over. It was quite weird.
Yeah, I think
I've never had that clarity. It was so clear.
that's cool.
It's weird, isn't it?
That's great. I love that. Well, instinct kicked in, or something came in to
But
get
I
you.
wasn't even thinking. Yeah, it was just sort of came into my head like the clearest thought. I just yeah. So
Yeah,
there you go.
that's
It's
funny.
strange, isn't it?
I'll tell you another little funny thing. Actually, there's one time when I remember at school, kind of like being asked by this music teacher, "Does anybody here want guitar lessons?" And I remember thinking, my dad was a guitar player, and me going, "I probably won't do that because it's going to be technical and too difficult." And
Yeah.
then my brain had made the decision to say no, but my hand shot up, and I was thinking,
Yeah.
why is my hand up? That's that kind of stuff's funny.
It's
Um,
it's it's so fascinating.
let's just, before we end up on my third question to you, let's just remind the listeners and the Gaslight Troubadours fans and other fans of my material that the track Hallelujah, Let Yourself Be Mine is released on all platforms on the 28th of March. So that's the Gaslight Troubadours featuring The Mirorim and our track Hallelujah, Let Yourself Be Mine with a lyric video. And we would appreciate your shares and support, and more tracks and an album will be coming out later on in the year. So my question, I've got two questions for question three. Do you want to go deep? Do
Oh,
you want to go deep, or
that's a lot.
do you want to go deep or a bit out there?
I really don't mind.
All right,
I
I'd like
can't be
to.
held responsible for my answers though.
Okay, this is kind of
We'll see how it goes.
this is like a psychologist question. um,
Nice.
who's your favorite Disney princess and why?
Something I struggle with because I don't really like Disney.
Okay, why don't you like Disney? Let's get into the why don't you like Disney?
Um,
Because it's traumatizing.
yeah. Um, Snow White. There you go.
Snow White. That's a good.
Um, yeah, Snow White. But in terms in Disney, well, kind of like the oldest, older stuff of
Yeah.
Disney. I just thought it became a little bit too cheesy.
Okay, let's jump to
So,
my.
and I'm a bloke.
Let's
I'm a
get to
boy, and go on, go on.
let's go to the other question. Do you believe in God?
Um, no, not really, but I'm not. I believe in there's something that guides us. There you
There we
go.
go. There we go.
I believe, yeah, not as specifically, but I'm open. I'd say I'm open. It's a bit like the question of do you believe in ghosts?
Yeah. Open.
I don't know if I do, but I'm open, so I kind of would like to.
Nice.
So I'm fascinated by it, but I don't know if I believe it.
Yeah. See, that's the kind of answer that a cult leader could say. Right. this is what you need to what's if you don't believe, it's because something inside of you is blocking you from believing.
Yes.
Like, this is how this shit works.
Yeah, that's right.
And you need to clear your own system, which is blocking you from seeing the greater truth. This is
Yeah.
the nonsense which is all in the lyrics for our upcoming track and the rest of the album. But anyway, hopefully all the people that may have tuned in have enjoyed this little conversation about the track. And cheers, Phil, for giving, for having a chat. And
Well, thanks to
no
you.
doubt I'll message you on Facebook in a minute.
Okay, nice one.
All right, mate. Nice
All right,
one.
thanks a lot.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.